Good morning, everybody. The time is 9:02. I will call the meeting of the Public Records Commission to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from by the way, Chair does detect a quorum. First item of business will be approval of minutes from September 7, 2017 meetings. Mr. Weeks, what a surprise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on page 2 of the minutes, in item E, the last time that strategic technology solution is mentioned, if S apostrophe could be added to the end of that, the way it is on the line right above that. Strategic technology solutions,
should have
systems.
Got you.
S apostrophe there. And also on page 2, Mr. Chairman, in item 3K, Ms. Harmon mentions the separation of powers in Article 2, Section 6 is what's listed there. I think the correct citation there would be to Article 2, Section 1 of the Tennessee State Constitution.
Okay. Ms. Harmon, you good with that?
I'm trying to find it right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Second sentence? Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Weeks?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you for your eagle eye. Anybody else? All right, so you've heard a couple modifications there. I'll entertain a motion to approve as amended. So moved. Properly moved. Second. Properly seconding. Discussion. Hearing no one, I take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. I was supposed to say no. Minutes are approved. All right, Mr. Callahan, next we have a consent agenda.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have 137 items on the consent agenda. These RDAs were reviewed upon submission. There were comments made by Library and Archives, Comptroller's Audit Division, and the Records Management Division. The agencies would then respond if they concurred with the comments and recommendations. If there was any suggested changes, they did, and so the director's comments reflect on any of those that have them the agreed upon changes between the agency and the reviewers. So they are all on for your approval.
All right. Everybody okay with the consent agenda? Do we need to bump anything off of it? All right, you've heard the explanation. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the 137 items found on the consent agenda. Properly moved, properly seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Consent agenda is approved. All right. So we have on our agenda RDAs for discussion. Do we have any of those?
No, there
Okay.
ended up none.
All right. Item number 4 is the records management reports, RMD reports. Mr. Callahan?
So, as I said, we continue to meet with the agencies and then review the RDAs as they're submitted. Since 2013, we have created, revised, or retired 1,721 RDAs out of approximately 1,970 RDAs. So on this month, we have 52 of the 137. There was 52 retired, 43 revised, and 42 created. To give you an idea in practical terms, since 2013, when we had 1,700 RDAs, we've retired 879. And in that process, we also then revised 593, and we created 249. So we now have 842 active RDAs. And part of this process has been to make it more efficient and more consistent, to make it easier for both the public to understand how long items are kept, and also for state employees so that they are able to go through. And so we've consolidated record series, because if you looked at in the past, there might be very similar records kept by the same agency, and one group might have 3 years, another 5, and another 7, and they really were all the same item with the same minimum retention period of, say, 3 or 5 years. So by combining it, it kept it easier for the flow of government and to store them together, destroy them at the appropriate time. So this also helps with consolidation of space and keeping things on track so that it flows in an easier manner. And so that's when you told me to, 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, to make things more consistent and to review all the RDAs. This is where we are in the process. So we have approximately 262 RDAs left, and we're working with all those agencies to complete that. Our goal is to try to get that done for October. That's what we're pushing for. It's ambitious, but I think we're close, and if we can't quite finish all that up in October, we'll get it done for next spring's meeting. In that vein, trainings and meetings, we are meeting with the agencies, and we conduct our classes again. We do 10 to 12 classes each year, as we've discussed in the past, covering everything from the basics up through how to handle legal holds and electronic records, how to be an efficient records officer. So those items. In 2017, we held 437 agency meetings, and we went out and did assessments. And between our records officers trainings and then also individual agency trainings, we conducted 33 classes and workshops to help the agencies understand what their responsibilities are and then also to better revise their RDAs. And we're continuing to conduct our assessments. In 2017, we conducted 38. Once again, our goal is to finish up the agency assessments this year and go over and see. And part of the goal of the agency assessment is to see help the agency with their use of space, their use of RDAs, give them firm numbers. That way, if they are going to engage in a digitization project, they have accurate numbers on what the cost would be to convert those records, and then where the line is of, if you only have things for a couple of years, don't let them die on the vine, destroy them at the end of their 2-3 year retention, but the older items may become worthwhile if you have to keep for 6-7 more years. Then it becomes more cost efficient to actually then convert them and destroy the paper records, especially when you consider the not just the records holding report, the 80 cents a year per cubic foot, but the real cost, which is the real estate cost, and as the state has been working to reduce that cost as well. And in 2017, agencies destroyed 11,367 cubic feet of records, with an additional 2,500 feet of records destroyed at Richards & Richards State Record Center. And if you look at the records holding report, we had an overall reduction of 62,000 cubic feet of records, of paper records. And that was a 13.76 decrease in the records stored in the agency. So as we continue to go forward on that, we're working with the agencies to make sure that they now are going to keep up with the retention periods for those electronic records, because you don't want to eliminate the storage problem on paper and create a storage problem in electronic. So it's important to also stay up on the destruction process of that. Are there any questions?
All right. Any questions, Mr. Callahan?
Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner?
You can give us some explanation. I see that some of the departments have done a very good job of reducing their records holdings, while others have actually increased their records holdings. Can you give us, I'm sure there's valid reasons for that, can you kind of summarize what those reasons might be?
There are some of the agencies, when we've been going out and doing the assessments, and part of that process is sometimes you discover that an agency thought that they were getting an accurate picture of what they had, especially with your regional and satellite offices, and then find out that they actually have a little bit more out in those areas. There's also, it comes up from time to time that there might be litigation holds. And so you can have items that are up and potentially sometimes thousands of boxes that would be destroyed, but it's a far-ranging lawsuit. And so they have to keep them and hold them on that. Now, one of the things that we're doing as part of our retention practices and checking is we if it's something at the State Record Center, Richards and Richards, we send a report to the agency saying, okay, this is due for destruction. If there's a litigation hold on that, they put it, it's marked as such. But we also reset that so that 5 years from now, we're not still waiting. We're going to continue to check with the agency on it. But a lot of those records that end up in the litigation aren't even over at Richards and Richards. They're still in agency, and so that's part of it. But a lot of it is doing that physical check where we go around and we look at every file cabinet, not to get into the actual records, but to identify what they have. And sometimes some of the destruction and some of the dramatic drops have been because as we've gone through and talked with the agency and said, this RDA, because we identify it by a specific RDA, this RDA, you just revised it. Last year you dropped it from 10 or 15 years down to 5 years. You now have about 100 cubic feet of records that you would have had to keep, but now you can get rid of it. So that's some of the give and take that comes up with the retention, the records holding report, and why we come up with that. A lot of the reductions have to do with agencies that are changing the way they're operating. They've got more folks out in the field and mobile and utilizing tablets and such. So there are a lot of digitization projects. But if you, we have this 60,000 cubic foot decrease in records stored in agency. At the same time, we only saw a 7,000 cubic foot increase at the State Record Center. So we're continuing to destroy, and it's not that everything was just moved from box A to box B, but we're having significant reductions as well.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? All right, thank you for the report.
Secretary Hargett, may I interrupt for just a
Yes,
minute?
ma'am.
Before you sit down, Kevin, I want to admit I completely overlooked this, but on 113 on the consent agenda, our records coordinator, Cecil Lofton, just texted me and said there's a mention in here of files for Bureau of Tin Care. It's kind of sandwiched in the middle of 113, so it's not immediately apparent, but it should say files for Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility.
On 113?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yep,
My apologies.
Okay,
I did not
I'm
catch
sorry.
that.
all right.
we will correct that.
So I'm going to say that, I'll call that typographical error, frankly, that doesn't change the substance of what our motion
Yeah.
was and what we approved.
But we will fix this for the minutes and for the official record. So,
Thank you.
you.
Let the record note that today is the 25th of April, and it's the first time that Eddie Weeks didn't catch something like that. Not a bad track record, Mr. Weeks. Not a bad track record. Okay. Thank you very much. He is fallible. How about that? Yeah. Like a cyborg of proofing. All right. So next we'll have a rulemaking hearing. You have a tab back here where you see the rules. I will now officially open the rulemaking hearing, and would ask that you identify yourself for the record and tell us what we've got here, and then I will open it for public comment.
Merrill McVicker, Assistant General Counsel of General Services and also General Services Records Officer.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kevin Callahan, Director of Records Management, Secretary of State's Office.
All right, thank you. Do you mind just briefly telling us any changes we've got to former rules and what the need here is?
For the rules, this is an update that was necessary partially because of the administrative changes that occurred several years ago, where we were updating. We had to update the Tennessee the legislation that moved records management from Department of General Services over to Secretary of State's office, and then upon consultation with the Public Records Commission to also update the wording of the rules to bring them up to date. So we updated the authority, purpose, and applicability to define the current version with entries dealing with the governing body, officers, meeting procedures, and the records management. Some of those things were just repeats of what was in the TCA, so we deleted those from the rules, but also updated it. And then we updated the definition of the records officer and moved it. And we also updated the responsibilities of the state agencies. So for the procedures of the management of records, details on the responsibilities of the agency's records program and the officer. The records holding report is listed as to be completed, and that it requires the agency to provide written notice to the division on the appointment of a new records officer. That way.
In this section, we really wanted to give agencies an ability to know what to do and how to do it, and give them some direction, and this is the section that really leads them in the correct direction.
And then Section 4 is the procedures for the adoption of records, and the expands on the current version of completing the records disposition authorizations and the review process. Provides detail on what is required in the RDA, the core data of defining it, what the record series covers. We expand on the process of submitting and the approval process, and then updates the information in the current version on records creation and amending records disposition authorizations. And Section 5, the procedures for the reproduction of stored records. We provide guidance on reproducing records in other formats, guidance on security and integrity of the agency records, and updates the information in the current version on retention and disposition. And then the last, Section 6, the procedures for disposal of records. So we replace and expand on the current version, and then updates on specifically records destruction and the destruction procedures, and information and guidance to help the agency records officer on doing that and then completing the records holding report. So now it reads easier for the records officer to be able to just open it and say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do in case they need a reference point, without going into, we have 48-page rules, procedures, best practices, goes into detail, but that's not always, if you're looking for something quickly and want to see what the rules require, this will do it.
All right. Any questions, comments from the committee members? And I'm going to open up to the public.
Go ahead.
Mr. Weeks first, and Commissioner Oglesby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 55,
Yours is stuck right at that time.
item number 6 under .02, it says recreation. Is that supposed to be recreation is what it says. Is it supposed to be recreation?
We will add the hyphen.
And he's back. Just like that, he's back.
Mr. Chairman, on page 56, or page 4, depending on how you want to look at it,
All right.
item number 8 concerns me just a bit. The way that's written, public record or records, as a phrase, I'm questioning if that is supposed to be public record as one defined term or records as a second defined term. Otherwise, the phrase record is not defined anywhere in these definitions. Left out of that, if you're copying it from the TCA, is the definition of state record, which is in the TCA that matches public record, but is not in this definition. And I thought the TCA made it rather clear that state record meant public record and vice versa. And state record is left out of these definitions, as is the word record.
So does our council have any thoughts on why it's defined that way?
So in Title 10, Chapter 7, 301, 6, public records or records, or, and then quotation, state record or records, I know that different agencies sometimes interchangeably use public record or records. Are you more concerned about that dual wording or including state record or records? I just want to make sure I'm clear.
I'm worried about that you're defining the phrase public record or records.
Okay. When our intent was to mean when you say either public record or record.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That makes sense. Do you think it would be a good change to add quotations on either side of public record and then a quotation record
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
quotation? Okay.
Right.
That works.
Ms. Kleinfeld, did you have something you want to offer to that?
Yeah, only that, I think you might also want to include state record, because public
Okay.
record encompasses not just state records, but municipal records and county records. And these procedures, rules, and so forth only apply with respect to state records. So you might want to put that clarification in there, I think the way it is in the code.
Okay.
I agree. Commissioner Oglesby, you had something?
I was just interested in learning what your engagement was with the agency record managers, if they've had a chance to review this document, they had any feedback, if it was participatory, collaborative kind of process.
We ran it through the members of the Public Records Commission. We've mentioned in our trainings over the past 3 years that we were in the process of updating it to clarify items, and if anyone had any questions, they could let us know and go through it. But it's the usual response was, can you put a little bit more detail so we know what we have to have in the, for instance, the core data of the RDAs. So that's been our process to see if anyone has anything that they want to include on these items.
But you've not had a committee or advisory board review this document before your proposal?
No, it was with the PRC members, their designees to review.
Thank you.
All right, further comments or questions for the committee? Yes, Mr. Weeks?
Page 5 or 57, the title of .04, Procedures for Adoption of Records. It seems to me that this is talking about RDAs, not records. Do you mean the adoption of an RDA by an agency, or?
Or so it should be procedure for the option of records disposition authorizations? Is that what you're
Yes, sir.
suggesting?
That seems to be what that
That
section
would
is
make
talking
sense,
about.
especially when you look at the entire section is really about RDAs.
So we could put down records disposition authorizations.
Anything else, Mr. Weeks?
Sorry, sir.
That's all right.
Page
You're like
7.
butter. You're on a roll.
Page 7 or page 59, the second line of item 5 at the top there, if it could just say, guard against unauthorized access to or manipulation of records. If just the word "to" could be added after the word access.
Okay.
That's a good change. As they all were.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anybody else? Now, I want to open up the opportunity for members of the public to come forward. I know we've got almost a full room. There's probably a capacity crowd outside waiting to weigh in on these issues. So if you'd like to speak, questions, feel free to come forward, please. Not all at once. All right, so I believe that will conclude our hearing. You'll go back and take the suggested changes and come back to us on an improved document. I would say that I guess it's our first Public Records Commission without Mr. Watkins here. And I know he worked very hard on this for a long time. And we miss him, know that you will serve us ably, but do want the minutes to reflect his efforts in bringing this forward. So thank you very much. Next item is, and that does conclude our rulemaking hearing today. Thank you. Next item is old business public questions. For those of you from the public who did not want to come forward to the rulemaking hearing, but would like to, yes, sir, Mr. Callahan.
To vote on the rules with the changes?
We do. So I'm going to assume we had conversation, you're going to make the necessary amendments to that we discussed here today. So as amended, I'm going to move that we approve the rules as amended by this body. So have a second? All right, probably move, probably second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, do we need to call the roll? We do? All right. Mr. Callahan, can I get you to call the roll for us? Or?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Hargett.
Aye.
Commissioner Dubray.
Aye.
Commissioner Weeks.
Aye.
Commissioner Oglesby. Commissioner Kleinfelter. Commissioner Toplovich.
Aye.
Commissioner Andrews?
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon?
I don't want to be testy, but I think I'm a non-voting member, so I just want to make sure I'm allowed to do this. I believe Janet and I both are.
Non-voting member unless it has to do with items
I'm just
referring to the
clarifying.
court.
I just want to be absolutely
Yeah.
sure. Then I say aye.
All right. Rules are approved. Thank y'all for correcting me, catching me in my error a moment ago. Our next item is old business. I guess I should bang that. Thank you. Old business public questions. We have any old business? Any questions, comments from the public? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Properly moved, properly seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.